Good afternoon, everybody. Paul Woodham back again after a 2-week break, taking over from Christian Spring for this STRI Facebook webinar production. And this week, I've got a very special guest, Frank Rossi, Associate Professor and Extension Turf Grass Specialist at Cornell University in New York State. So welcome, Frank, and thank you ever so much for giving up your party or early day over there. The weather's sweltering here today on a fine late spring, early summer day. I don't know how things are looking over your way.
Wouldn't call it sweltering. A week and a half ago, we had snow on the ground. It started to warm up a little bit. We're consistently at 12 to 15 degrees C now. That's not sweltering.
No. So we're about 26 here today, and looking very fine. Very dry period. Hasn't rained now for a couple of months after 6 to 9 months of wet conditions, depending on where you are regionally. So I think we've said before, it's sort of these challenges keep on coming at us with sort of prevailing dry, drought, heat stress periods into wet winter conditions. Plagues of crane fly leather jacket pests at the moment around parts of the UK. Coronavirus. So what else could come our way? It doesn't get much easier. So as always, we welcome our viewers onto this, and please participate. Ping any questions you got to myself or Frank as we sort of go through the next 40 minutes or so of discussing all things sports, golf, and certainly golf green speeds as a topic of today. Firstly, I suppose, Frank, we should sort of say, look, golf returned to England a week ago now. We've been 1 week back. I was fortunate to be in Wales this week. That came back this Monday. What's the situation where you are?
Well, what we sort of been to be going through as a country is a very decentralized approach. We don't have a real national initiative here in America, in the States right now. It doesn't feel very united. I think there are regions that are united around certain things. So what we see in society is reflecting itself in golf. There's a widespread patchwork. Where I am in particular in New York, it's just about opening up full. But what's for sure happening everywhere is that there's some real perturbation. There's some real shock that's happened to this business that's resulting in a variety of effects. Clubhouses closed, sanitation requirements going up, demand for labor increasing when revenue is decreasing, right? Raising the, demands that it take to make the same amount or less, depending on tee time space, depending on your reliance with cart revenue. So any discussion about golf courses has to begin with the economics of it, because if we've learned anything from studying it, I've learned anything from studying it for 30 years. And now I have a couple of young men doing research with us, myself and Doug Soldat at the University of Wisconsin. We've started to do surveys on just sort of, what determines how much pesticides you use? What determines how much fertilizer you use? What determines how much area you manage? And no surprise, the more money you have, the more you do those sorts of things. And the less money you have, the more you figure out how to either provide those conditions without those things, or not provide those conditions and provide different conditions. So certainly everything we do is calibrated around cost, and that's going to see a significant reduction. And what that is, I think, forcing a lot of people to do is to rely on research that we've been conducting for the better part of 30 years at 3 universities, and different ways of looking at managing in a more environmentally responsible way turns out to make a lot of sense economically. And, one of the things I've said for a really long time is I don't think we should compromise conditions. I don't think we should tell people you're going to get worse golf. It's going to cost you more to get the conditions. And I think that there's enough technology at our fingertips and enough knowledge about the way our systems work that if we thought about them more from the kinds of things we do rather than the products that we use on them, and we monitor things like growth, and we pay attention to our growth in our top dressing programs, and we sort of try to zero out a lot of these superfluous fertilizer applications or fugitive water that moves about the golf course applied inefficiently. It's going to force us to bring some more thought and technology to bear to help us provide the conditions that people are going to expect. I still don't know if those conditions are going to change for the upper echelon. We do see them changing a lot for the lion's share of the people that are outside this sort of golf bubble that we talk about in major golf markets, private, high-end clubs, lots of affluence. Even in conditions like this, they don't lose much wealth, continue to spend money on this amenity because it's a safe practice for them. So I think there's every country, every golf market's got those exclusive, and those things are still going to see some adjustments. But I think the middle of the road clubs, the clubs, if you had weaknesses going into this, you're going to have worse weaknesses coming out of this. And everything calibrates around that. Everything calibrates around that.
It's interesting you say that. As I've been fortunate being out and about the last sort of few weeks, and this anticipation, excitement about coming back to play, and it has been welcomed, really welcomed. In England, we're at 2-ball play. Doesn't have to be from the same household. In Wales, slightly differently. It's single ball play unless you're playing with somebody from your same household. But everybody's thrilled to be back. And I don't think yet the expectation level, this calibration has really kicked in with the golfer, because should the member be expecting the same as before? I mean, we've been through this period of sort of minimal or lockdown maintenance, essential maintenance. Things are only slowly coming back from it. Are we going to be able to change the expectations?
Well, I mean, I'm a plant scientist, Paul. I don't know about you, but I purposely chose this line of work because I don't want to try to figure people out. And golfers are a subset of the human species that's eluded me a lot of my career. And what I've learned is it follows human nature that once you give people something and there develops a cultural expectation for it, without a significant conversation, educational program, and you look at what I know the RNA has been doing and what I know the USGA has been doing is, tee it forward, right? Play faster, right? Get youth and all the things we've been talking about. Those kinds of organizations have to start saying it in a way, and they have to get professional golfers to say it. And when a golfer's now playing on the tour, now the tour is going to start, and here's what's going to happen. The tour courses are going to have 12-foot greens on, because they've got the resources to do it. And that's going to continue to drive expectation. And if we don't intervene and have a conversation with our golfers about what it costs us to do things, and what is a 10-foot green versus an 11-foot green, 11-foot green versus a 12-foot green, depends on your situation.
Okay. So I ran a little survey just on Twitter just ahead of this last couple of days, and I guess in terms of the first question is what feedback have you received from golfer, and in terms of green speed, 53% of about 40 participants said no comment on green speed. Now, I think that's good. That's hopefully what you'd expect. People are just getting back out there. Weather's great. Fantastic to be back out on a golf course. 26% said, green pace is a bit slow. 21% said it was good. So, look, it told us nothing really other than just a bit of a gauge of where people were seeing. And, maybe we're in a situation that all the preparation you can do in the world until greens get some feet back on them and play maintenance really gets going, that the green probably just won't roll well. And heck, it's only sort of middle of May here.
Right. Okay. So there's so many caveats to this, but let's start with, there seems to be some idea that I can give you some sense of golfers. So let me try to go down that hole just a little bit further. When you look at any survey and the one I always cite is the one that Bill Desk did at UConn many years ago, about 450 people. He knew the green speed of the greens, and he broke out. He asked them what they thought it was, and he broke it out, and it essentially said the lower the handicap, the more they were likely to underestimate the speed. Everybody underestimated the speed to a tune of 75% of the people. Always said they were slower. But when you dive into that data a little bit more, a lot of people don't really think about green speed. On any given day, what percentage of your customers are fussing about green speed? Is it a high percentage? Is it how many notice? If they notice, how many think it distracts them? And I think if you looked at that, we'd again be identifying this small subset of low handicappers who want to play a player's course all the time and are mixed among a membership that you got to hit the middle of the road. And this is the argument for measuring, because the only way you're going to get a compromise among people like this is to say, well, hey, I can give you this. Is this good enough for everybody? Well, they're still complaining. Oh, it's too fast for me. Okay. Well, you go fight amongst yourselves and let me know what you want. That's the way I would approach it. That's, of course, why I'm not a golf course superintendent, because no one would want to be talked to like this. But if they were, I would say, I can tell you what the number is. I mean, every way and sideways, we have ways of telling how to do good greens and deliver them. I don't know why we're not having that conversation.
So we think back to what was the stimp meter for, and it was a tool to help the superintendent or manager get consistency between greens and not an inter-course comparison. One of the best uses, innovative ways of uses of a stimp meter I've seen is where the tape measure was taken away. Club was, they knew what their target was. Let's say, their target was 9'6", their daily target, not competition target, daily target, 9'6", and they got a mark on a section of putting green, and they weren't sort of rolling this small section of putting green, sort of cheating their way through it. There were simply 2 marks. Didn't take a tape measure out. They just stimped, and if the ball reached that mark moving left, and if it reached that mark moving right, that was fine. If it went beyond the mark, there wasn't it's 10 foot today, because 10 foot becomes 10'6", becomes 11 foot. It's this perpetuating sort of desire for more. But the greens are a bit slow today. Well, no, they reached our target, and it was I thought I quite liked the way of it's a really cool self-assessment, taking the tape measure away.
Well, you're going to be hard pressed to find a scientist that tell you data isn't a good place to start. And if you can't sort of really discuss the nuances of a number versus 2 dots, to my mind, it's the same thing. We lack targets. We lack sort of quantifiable targets. Listen, if you're growing apples, you're growing grapes, you're growing carrots, you're growing onions, I don't care what other kind of specialty horticultural crop you're growing other than grassland for golf courses. You're measured by the stuff you sell, the quality of that produce. And you and I know, and I'm sure it happens in the UK, a better looking apple commands a higher price than a blemished apple. And even if the blemished apple has biologic or organic on it, so to speak, maybe it affords a different price. We don't see those kinds of things around here for us from my perspective, that allows us to differentiate things like that. And I don't know, I sort of lost my train of thought, but at the end of the day, we got to have targets. I think we need numbers. I think there's ways of balancing these things that aren't difficult. Can I say, since now we're talking and people are listening, I don't believe having fast greens are that difficult. I really don't. I think we fuss a lot about this. And I think I just don't see how we've complicated this other than because let's think about some of the broad directions the industry's gone, right? Some of the biggest things that I think we fixed that, are still not doing so well is number one, we've cut down a lot more trees in the United States. And I don't know what your parkland golf courses are there, but we've been able to turn them back to what they should be. So we got good growing conditions.
That's interesting.
Right? Number two, I'd say if you don't know how to top dress and manage your soil root zone with the types of sands you use and the way you produce firm greens, then you're not doing your job well. What I've learned from 30 years of paying attention to this and 10 before that, chasing them with a hand mower, if you've got firm greens, everything else gets easy. So the question now becomes, how
Yeah.
do you have firm greens? And I believe the conversation about firm greens is now at its peak in the clipping volume and Micah Woods's OM 2460, where we're able now to link growth with the amount of sand we need. We have a knowable target for what we can do, and we back out growth and growth regulators, nutrients and water around growth that now Doug at Wisconsin is describing around traffic and weather parameters, right? How weather determines growth. Climate is a driving factor for growth. And again, this is revolutionary in the sense we've always sort of thrown out, we don't care about clippings. Oh, how many buckets do you get today? Well, now we're realizing there's so many of these things that are intimately linked, Paul, that if you have firm greens, everything else is easy. I've seen really good POA greens. We got beautiful POA greens at the Bethpage Black Course. Let me tell you, we've had a tournament there. I think they know what they're doing. And I think they tell you is once they got firmer, they got much easier to do. Once they got firmer, they took different rainfall periods. Once they got firmer, they were easier to water. They didn't have to lower the heights. And when they did lower the heights for periods of time, it wasn't that stressful. So, of course, there's times when it gets tricky. Nighttime temperatures are above 25 degrees C, and the heat stress comes on in cool season climates. Those times get to be tricky, but I don't think these things are hard to do if you've got a good growing environment and a good firm soil and you're managing your growth rate. That's it.
I think I absolutely agree with that. The firmness is king. Absolutely. And
King.
the you and I had a conversation a few weeks ago where we were sort of discussing some of the program data we'd got from all this the banker data over sort of the 7 years data set which got now, which was sort of going up towards a 10 years reviewer data set, and average parkland conditions, average parkland green speed through a period of 2016 in June the 1st to August the 31st was 9 foot 1 inch. In a links course, that was 9 foot 4 inch links, again slightly firmer surfaces and slightly different texture. Again, there's a sort of organic matter relationship here, and how the moisture and the fatness of the POA leaf and the organic matter in the turf base just creates that friction, and that friction drags the ball on the POA, and that accentuates if you haven't got the firm surface. So absolutely agree with you in terms of if we have got a firmer surface, it becomes easier.
Yeah, and you're not even, I mean, you're talking about 9 foot green speeds. I got to tell you, honestly, that puts it into like that would be like a run of the mill state park golf course over here in the States. Right. So when I want to make sure I calibrate my commentary about what's fast, I mean, a lot of the high end people I deal with in the metropolitan areas, big golf markets across the country, where, you have the affluence where people are members of 5 or 6 different clubs and compare those clubs for their green speeds. And that puts additional pressure. So I'm used to guys talking to me about, 11 and a half as the bottom, and 12 and a half, 13 on weekends, men's days, things like that. So a lot of those are even on very undulated surfaces. So I think it's important for all of us to keep in mind we have to calibrate what's fast and what's possible. And I'm talking a lot about, bent grass greens like Chris Trittabaw's got at Hazeltine, or POA annual greens like Mike Hadley's got at Bethpage. Guys that are just doing it at a really high level, they'll tell you it got a lot easier when they got firmer, when they had good sand profiles and they kept their growth where it needed to be.
So before we came on air, we were having a quick chat and we were talking about sort of inputs and where we are, there's sort of the post COVID world or continuing COVID world. And yeah, when maintenance crews are reduced, what I've seen in the last few weeks is through the job retention scheme that the UK has got, that a lot of clubs were utilising that. So the greenkeeping teams probably went down by about 50%. 2 to 3 people, maybe 4 at best. There's 1 or 2 clubs that kept sort of more teams in. They're in a slightly better place returning back to play. But we're still in a position now of trying to work around golf. The golfers back. Always be said, be careful what you wish for. And if only our golf course had no golfers. But, we've got to work around them. And, we've got to think about, well, what are we preparing the course for? It is social golf in an unsocial sense. It's not tournament conditions. If we want to, if our clients are and the committees are saying, right, more, a bit more refinements on the greens, it's more time, it's usual time, it's even more time spent, we might have to back off on other areas. Now, digressing from greens, looking at bunkers. So bunkers are a real challenge for clubs because that's where maintenance has really backed off. Now we've got no rakes at the moment. One club down south, and down south of the UK, we've had very dry periods in the last few years, and sand stability has been an issue. When moisture drops out, look, whatever sand you've got, you're going to lose some form of stability. Some perform slightly better. And that drying out process has probably accelerated in some courses which have reconstructed the bunkers with different types of membranes to they play better for 9-10 months of the year for sure. Those 2 months are really dry conditions. Unless you can manipulate the water back into the sand through irrigation, you're going to lose some stability. But at one club of late, it's sort of, right, we've been dry, last 2 months dry conditions. How are the bunkers? Never been better. Why? Because there's placing in the bunkers at the moment because we're not doing any maintenance. And it was like, that was sort of right. Okay, are we going to be in this world now where suddenly, the presentation of bunkers is less important because we're going to put less into them?
Well, again, I think every answer is going to be, it depends. I think if there is some social contract among golfers that say, our superintendent and greenkeeper has convinced us that this is a very, we can live with this. We can play seasonal golf. We can live without rakes because that used to take 2 or 3 people. And look what they can do by we don't either have those 2 or 3 people, or, listen, I'm a grass guy again, but what I've learned about bunkers in my career in golf is that they've always, and we've raised the stakes in there like we've raised the stakes everywhere else. Look at our naturalized grasslands. We spray as many herbicides and growth regulators in our native areas. The trouble we go to make it look like we do nothing in these native areas is ridiculous. And so we've done this with bunkers as well, right? We've raised the stakes. We've made it so a good player sees the bunker as a safer option than the difficult grass. That when you listen to architects like Ian Andrews, and he talks to you about how laying out a hole and designing native areas to challenge them in ways that don't require a bunker, right? We've sort of got complacent. We've allowed architects to sort of paint the canvas. And even my pal Gil Hance, who I love to death, him and Wagner, I love them to death. But how many acres of bunkers are aesthetic? Now, there are clubs that pay attention to that. It starts out as a waste bunker, and next thing you know, it's getting managed all the time. I think we have to recalibrate this part of the golf course and say clearly, like I've heard superintendents in chorus in the United States say, I love this. When there was no golfers, number one, I could move about the course. Even when they came back and they know we can't get the equipment in or do this more because of labor, boom. Any of those detailings that are going to allow clubs to focus on the greens. If you can have that social contract with your golfers, among your golfers, you're going to have more success. I just think, Paul, a lot of what we're talking about is a lot of people went into this business. Listen, I was going to be a golf course superintendent because I don't want to talk to people. I want to do my job. I want to be Bill Murray. I want to be off. Leave me alone. And the reality is that personality type has to adapt to the demand that's placed on it right now to communicate what we do to golfers in a very explicit and, dare I say, data-driven way. I'm not suggesting there's no artistry left. But I think we need, as my pal Doug Soldat said to me a while ago, less art and more science. I'm not saying no art, but less art and more science.
So, right, I'm going to come back to you on the movements of greenkeeping around the golf course in a minute. Now, we've got some questions which and a few people to say hello to here. So, Eric being a regular. Hi, Eric. Hope you're well out there. Mohammed, thanks for dropping into us this afternoon. Comment from Mark Brooks. I'm a low handicap golfer and a scientist. Wow, that's an achievement. Data and communication is key. Yeah, absolutely agree. I mean, we've done so much of that, and you so much more understanding when you can measure objective playability. Still listen to feedback. That's still important, but at least you can turn around and say, yeah, but I don't agree with you. John Milne, firmness is key. Yeah, I think we agree on that. We don't relay firmness details to golfers. So why do we give them stimp meter readings when golfers don't know what the stimp meter relates to? Okay, so let's hang on that one. So out in New York State there, Frank, are you giving them stimp meter readings?
I think some guys do, and some guys feel like numbers create problems. But to me, I just don't understand the reluctance. I understand that they don't want to get into a battle about it, and it makes it harder to have a discussion sometimes because people misinterpret numbers. But gosh darn it, folks, isn't that our job to sort of help them understand? Of course, if somebody gives me like GDP, oh, GDP's down. Oh, GDP. What the hell is GDP? Who the hell knows what GDP? If I don't have somebody tell me what GDP is, I don't know what GDP is, right? How many people say GDP have no idea what it means? How many people have green speed numbers, have no idea what that means? That means it's our job to explain it to them. I don't accept that not having a number is good. I don't accept that. And you can disagree with me on it, but you can argue this with me every way and sideways. You're not going to see a scientist say a number isn't better. I'm not saying a number makes it easier. I'm not saying that's not my job. My job is to make your job easier sometimes. My job is to say, hey, you want to be more efficient. I can tell you as a scientist, if you can come to an agreement on a target, you're going to find out that 9 days out of 10, you're going to spend less resources to meet that target. And there are examples out the kazoo about this, from Mike Morris up at Crystal Downs in Frankfort, Michigan, to the Bethpage State Park and the state park golf courses around New York State that, would be a run-of-the-mill, it's a the way you guys, the kinds of conditions some courses are in. They're not detail-oriented. I call them run-of-the-mill because there are people out there just enjoy playing golf. They have some weeds. The bunkers aren't perfect, right? They don't have the details. And Paul, that's something we can agree on, right? If you're going to focus on things and you have less resources, some of the details got to go.
I agree. So I think with the key summary of this sort of targets are good for understanding. If you haven't got a target, then it's always going to be difficult to sort of work towards
even if it's just for you.
Really, yeah, I agree. So message from Pete Laser here. So back in the day, Pete, I don't know how long you've been in greenkeeping, mate, but back in the day, that's how we used to manage the green speed, by managing fertility in conjunction with water management. Agreed. So there's a so coming here, Frank. So where and why has it gone wrong?
Well, I think it's gone wrong in some ways because we've built in America, built an industry. We've had technology and resources available, including money, and people valued this. And as they did, superintendents saw that technology available. They saw what was happening in golf. Tiger Woods was coming through. The people who liked golf were happy to spend money on it. I don't know that we grew the game. But anyway, the long and the short of it is, I think we had more money and we figured out a way to use it. I
Spent
don't
it.
know that
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
just don't know that it's more complicated than that. Now, can I say to all these old school guys who want to say, oh, back in the day, I'm almost 60. So I'm remembering what it was like. Don't you old guys start to tell me back in the day. I was there back in the day. And back in the day, you got paid a lot more for green grass and other sorts of things than you got paid for that today. Right? I was back in the day when, 9-foot greens. Ooh, what'd you put bricks on your greens to get them to roll? What are you, Oakmont? You're like, come on. Technology's gone available. Mowers have gotten better. We've been, sold a bill of goods around the kind of fertilizers we need. And I think, that, if anything, argues about fertility. To me, fertility should be like second thought behind 5 other things. People that fuss about nutrition on their golf courses, unless they've got serious water problems or unless they've concocted serious soil problems, I just don't know what the emphasis on nutrient management is unless it's built around protecting water quality and minimizing the need for any supplemental nutrient beyond maybe nitrogen and iron, manganese a little bit, but that's it.
So what do you think those? So you mentioned those sort of what those key things ahead of nutrition. Nutrition is an important part for self health, but really we spoke earlier about the clip yield, the growth rates, and look, if your greens are growing like Billy-O, you're going to struggle with green speed anyway.
But you struggle with green speed. You struggle with green speed when they're growing like crazy. Yeah. Not because of the growth that you take off, but what Micah is trying to get at, and what everybody that's measured firmness on greens and ball roll is trying to get at, is what is that contribution in the verdure, in that material that's above what's being influenced by the sand and moisture. Because that is where the intimacy between the ball and the grass is happening. And I think they're trying to get at it and then work back into moisture management, nutrient management. And to me, you got a good growing environment. You should be able to have good light penetration and good drainage, air drainage, light drainage, all the drainage you need, water drainage, all the drainage that surfaces need. And we're talking putting greens, of course. After that, you gotta figure out a way to manage growth so you don't have to be chucking sand like crazy. That's the revolution that all these young scientists have brought to the discussion about green speed and firm greens. It shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that hard.
You mentioned drainage there, Frank. And my first week at STRI, sort of over 10 years ago now, with the then head of agronomy, went on a visit, and he said you can sum green agronomy up, or good golf course management in 2 words: good drainage. And you look, and again, I refer back to interest when you said earlier, look, we've taken a lot of trees out on golf courses, and that's still such a challenge in terms of winter disease management, such a challenge. And it's one of those harder battles within club committees, because all trees are good. Surely all trees are good. You're telling me that, but they're not.
Well, the trees are one thing, but let's talk about something we have some control over that's to our regular knowledge. Now, there's a fair amount of data in the literature and anecdotally that if you apply more potassium on a regular basis, you're going to get more winter diseases. And that's predominantly fusarium patch, right? Microdochium patch. And there is some evidence that things like rolling can be good. There is some evidence that phosphites and defense activators can be good, right? And so, maybe many people still are putting out potassium on a regular basis. And so these are the kinds of adaptations that if you're not paying attention to what data is telling you and science is trying to inform you, that you can then incorporate into the way you do things. This is what I mean by when I think this recalibration and this, restructuring of the golf industry is going to happen. I think there's a lot of low hanging fruit out there, from throwing ball washers out of golf courses to reducing our reliance on a lot of these superfluous, gratuitous nutrient applications, even I say pesticide applications that we make for job security, not so much because we're thinking it through with risk models or growth or other data-driven approaches to using those products. So that's my soapbox about that.
Yeah. Okay. So I've got a couple more comments here. A comment from Eric. Having worked on both sides of the ocean, I agree that green speed standards are far higher in the US. But with more travel pre-COVID-19, I feel the world, UK, is being unfairly held to US green speeds. In particular, labor resources are lower outside the US. Look, I mean, we're all going to have to adjust, I think, to what the labor resources are. It comes back to that sort of inputs versus outputs discussion. We got a couple of comments from Eric Savard saying hi, Frank.
Oh yes, hey Eric, yes.
And I'm sure we got another.
I'll just jump to Eric's. Was a good seedsman and agronomist when I knew Eric years ago.
Well, I love the old diminishing returns talk you had with us, Frank. So he goes on to say. And we've got Alex here. Personally believe providing members and visitors with stimp meter readings opens a can of worms. For example, if the greens are stimps at 10 foot and the reading was measured AM, and PM, the green speeds will have reduced to top growth. It's about consistency. I think, look, this is why green speed is such an interesting.
I didn't say using green speed data was going to make it easy.
It is.
That wasn't the question I was asked. I was asked, do you think green speed is a way to make things better for the industry, the environment, the economics of golf? And the answer is an unequivocal yes. Does it make it harder? I would say, yeah, in some cases. But what is so hard when you got to say, oh, somebody asked me to simp. Oh, it's this. Oh, yeah. Well, we measure it at this time of day, and we've got enough science to tell us you play later in the day. Yeah, you're playing the same golf course with the people who you're playing with, but it's going to be a foot to 8 inches slower, depending on moisture and a variety of things. But it's always slower. It's always slower.
Now it's interesting that if we're talking about protocols in science, in agronomy, you're taking measurements. The protocols have got to be right because data is great. We agree on that, don't we, Frank? Data is great, but if the data is inaccurate,
let's say data are great, right? All my scientist colleagues would like me to say data are great.
But if data is inaccurate, then that's probably even more problematic. And probably one of the frailties of the stimp meter is it can be easy to misuse. And you've got to be quite, in the tournament work we've done, you've got to be really precise. You've got to be patient with it. If you get 2 balls roll out right, and then the third one suddenly goes way off or stops right short. Well, what happened to that one?
Okay.
Was that
Hold
one
on
right? Were the other ones right?
Okay. All right. There's a couple of questions, right? Obviously, there is reluctance to embrace this in the industry because we're still having a discussion about methodology, of which the methodology of the stupid metal bar was developed, 50 years ago. What are we still talking about this for? It has its limitations. No one is suggesting anything. That's why they've done a lot to, make a smaller one. And, scientists in the States have calibrated, but I think we're missing the point. Let's go back to the nice example you used earlier. Let's say a superintendent was able to determine from a 6 to 8 month period of data collection, surveying golfers about how they like the greens and collecting data on 6 greens every day, morning and night. One guy spends an hour throughout some period of time collecting data. Okay. All right. And that data is used to set a range. And this is known as the Morris method. Tom Nicolai developed this. I don't know. He's as old as dirt like me. They developed this a long time ago. So now you have a range, right? In your example, now you got your 2 dots. Okay. Now I go out there, whoop, whoop, whoop. I do my 2 dots. It's outside, it's inside. I say, we're in the target range. It's at the high end of our range. It's at the low end of our range. We're right in the middle. It's faster than our range. Wow, we're sort of outside that range today because, wow, I wasn't expecting it to not rain, or the sprinklers didn't go on last night, or, wow, that nutrient or that growth regulator's kicking in and I wasn't anticipating it. And man, you're fast as hell today. I don't understand what's complicated about this other than it takes you some time. And you've got to invest some intention. You've got to be intentional about it. If you're going to sit in and give me 15 reasons why you don't have to do things, we're never going to change. You think there's 100 reasons not to do this and one good reason to do it, because we know that as you do it, you're going to have a better operation. Soup to nuts. You're going to have a better operation, better playing conditions, more efficient management.
I suppose the challenge is going to be with as let's say our labor resources and more pressure on time. It'll come back round to, and we see it with the moisture meter. I haven't got time to do it now. I would throw the argument back and say, right, what we're seeing now. Look, I haven't got time to take moisture readings. Yeah, but look at the look at the weather that we're going through. Look at the irregularity from the irrigation system and the problems it's creating, and the more time you're spending on those problems compared to actually, right, look, if we can understand a little bit more, and look, it may only be information that will strengthen your point to go to the committees and say, look, I am doing the best I can, but I cannot move this without that. Maybe it'll help. I said I was going to come back to how greenkeeper activities, and one thing of interest that I've seen with golf coming back to play, and I've seen a few courses. I've seen one course actually do it, and a few others talk about it on social media. We're not going to put tee markers back out just yet. We're only just coming back to social golf. And look, it's something we haven't got to move. It's going to be safer for us because who's been touching them? And actually, we've got to be a bit smarter around our operations, cutting the tee boxes. So let's see how it goes. Now, a few will say, well, hang on a minute, all golfers are going to tee off from the same spot. But, I think it's worth giving it a go and think about doing things different for a period of time until things get back to normal, or maybe we're in the new normal now.
So what if they tee off in the same spot?
Well, I think tees are going to live to fight breathe another day, aren't they?
Yeah. I mean, okay, so let's just think through the logic here. I know everybody's trying to get me 15 ways and sideways to say it's too much of a burden and it takes too much time, that somehow data are a bad thing, and I'm just not going to do it. Now, with regard to this issue, why don't we have golfers accountable for their behavior? I see a lot of shaming going on around the way golfers take divots on the range. How that's viewed as the violation of a social contract that people seem to have on a golf course with the way they should be taking divots. And superintendents had no problem shaming people about that. Same idea with golf spikes. If you had crappy shoes and maybe you were a heavy walker and you were playing on the wrong day, you could shame people into saying, oh, stop wearing those shoes. Now, you mean to tell me, do we service a clientele that if they see it turn into mud and water sitting there like a goal mouth in front of a soccer goal, that those knuckleheads are going to keep playing in that same spot? I don't know why we fuss about these things. So what if they play in the same spot? Tell them, you keep playing in that spot, look at how it's going to get. I can't keep it. What the hell are we doing? I mean, all right. You don't want to tell them, go out and top dress the darn thing every day and seed it every day and see how they like playing in that. I don't understand what our reluctance is to hold the golfers accountable in a very soft way. Oh, what? We're not using tee markers because it takes us more time. Now, you don't want to. You want to give me another guy? You want to give me another guy? You want to do? I think it's good to get rid of tee markers. We're going to find out it's probably not going to be a big deal if you touch them the next morning, right? We're going to find out. Everybody's going to figure out this is a bait and switch. Like, oh, we got to get rid of it. Let's get ready. Still, for getting rid of stupid things. There's a tournament being played that day. It's got to be. Can't you put spray dots on the ass? Come on. Are these people like duh? They got to be led everywhere? To put the ball down where your partner ball is playing and play the ball. What is the problem?
Yeah, I mean, I do believe.
Am I wrong about this, Paul?
Sort of, look, I think, just getting, let's focus on it. So this is social golf. We've come back to. Golf has done really well. Greenkeepers done really well to work within the restrictions and get golf courses back up to a position that they can open. And let's just get out there and enjoy it.
Everybody's telling me that. Not the bubble. Can we keep the high-end courses aside for a minute, the 20% that they're going to do what they're going to do because members are going to pay for it. Let's talk about the rest of the industry that's looking for ways to address this from a small business perspective all the way to a semi-private member, single owner, whatever the operation is, right? They're looking for ways to meet those clients' demands with the constraints that they have. And in my mind, that's a broader discussion about what makes golf fun and relaxing the rules around this. And everybody that wants to grow the game of golf that I talk to says we've got to get people more involved. We got to onboard them better, and we've got to bring some fun back in. And not everybody uses the word fun when they think about their first experiences with golf. And I think that's an enormously missed opportunity that the rules of tee markers are an indication of. We're so rigid with the way we want to be as a darn industry. And you Brits are even worse than us, right? I mean, you guys originated the rigidity that we imported and then put on steroids.
The queuing system.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
I've got one final question, and it's a difficult one to throw in, just a few minutes left, but I was particularly interested by some of the work that you've done on golf shoes, the cleats on the greens. I know you've done work with a company, but just wondered what your findings were really from that in a nutshell.
In a nutshell, what we found is one of the single largest effects that impacts how much a shoe will cause visible damage and measurable damage from a green speed perspective is very much influenced by the person first.
Okay.
We've tested
lazy feet.
Well, that takes really in-depth study, and it's enormously complicated. But the shoe design people have stumbled onto some designs that are a little more resilient around who's wearing them and the kind of damage that they offer. And it's always this battle that the footwear companies have had with traction and swing club speed, right? Shoes have been designed to maximize performance. And once we figured out if you swung the club faster, you scored better, right? And you could swing the club faster if your foot was stabilized in some way. The shoe design went down the traction train, right? Traction, swing speed, swing speed. So they had a target, and so they chased it. And then along the way, a lot of other companies got on that train. Oh, this is easy. We got traction. I'm in Adidas is in soccer. Puma's in this. We got traction. Boom. And then it's like, oh, wait, traction causes a lot of problems. Oh my gosh, we better try to figure this out. And then they try to back it out. And I got to tell you, they've been, as an industry, befuddled, I think. Some companies are making better adaptations than others. I think a lot of people are not doing a data-driven approach yet. And that's what we've been part of with FootJoy. And I can tell you in general, it is that balance between what we think is going to be an enhancement in performance with the green friendliness and potential impact that it's going to have. That's driven by people. It's driven by the rounds of golf in a particular area. We measure things there. So number one, it's driven by people. Number two, it's driven by surface and firmness.
It's coming right back around to firmness, isn't it?
It's coming right back around to firmness.
Yeah.
And if you rolled, you had less damage. If you didn't roll on a regular basis, you had more damage from modern golf footwear. Right? Modern golf footwear. If you didn't roll, you saw more damage that day, independent of shoe, independent of person.
Is that because it was a smoother, tighter starting point, or
I don't. That's as far as I'm willing to go with the data. That's all I can tell you from the data we collected. Right?
Yeah.
We saw as soon as you start walking on a green. From a green that's not traffic. Okay, here's what happens. We mow the greens in the morning. We take green speeds of the right after, as soon as we're done mowing, right? And then we traffic. Now, the ones that don't get trafficked, right? We measure them at the end of it as well, right? And they tend to adjust and drop. So we calibrate all the speeds to what happens to the control. So what I'm going to say is relative to untrafficked. As soon as you put traffic on a surface, it slows down about a foot.
Yeah. Obstacle.
Just like that.
Deflect the ball. Yeah.
Just like that. A foot.
Yeah. So look, I mean, yeah, let's sort of round this up now, because it's been a great discussion. We could go on all day, I'm sure, and I've had a few more questions coming, which I apologize probably haven't got round to. But look, yeah, in a nutshell, it's going to come round to firmness. It's going to come round to water management. It's going to come round to the organic matter, the sort of resilience in that top,
which is driven by growth.
Yeah, and it's growth, right? So yeah, if we can understand growth, life is going to be a lot easier for us.
Yeah, we as again, I'm gonna, I just think he's saying the right thing, and I hope you get to have him on. Doug sold that. He just said we got to get growth right. I don't know how we do it, but we can't just start saying, "Oh, how many buckets did you get today?" It's got to be a little bit more than that if we're going to be serious about managing firmness of the playing surface.
Yeah. Right. Look, Frank, absolutely fantastic. Pleasure to have you join us today. Thank you so much. Thanks pleasure. For all our listeners. Thanks for the questions. Stay safe out there, Frank. And we'll see viewers next week on the Facebook Live again. Cheers.